This radio show is a paid placement. Welcome to Wealth Michigan with the McIntoshes. I'm Mark Elliott. Mindy McIntosh, the founder and president of McIntosh and Associates, started the company back in 2004. Husband Nolan, he'll help you with your market investments. Are you taking too much risk in your portfolio, not enough risk, or the right amount? That's really a big concern for today's retirees, making sure that their money lasts as long as they do, making sure they're not overextended when it comes to the market, and how do we set our investments up? And investments are not your retirement plan. They're just a part of it. Income, investment, taxes, health care, estate planning, Social Security. When and how do you take it? What about Medicare? Mindy, an expert in the Medicare world. So they're here to help you. They just don't know if they can until they hear from you. Have any questions or concerns? 877-222-8849, 877-222-8849. If you'd like to find out more about the team, there's some great information on their website as well. It's wealthmichigan.com. wealthmichigan.com. How are you guys? You doing all right?
Yeah.
Very
great.
good.
Yeah.
2022, right?
So Nolan,
Here.
We're there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nolan, for Christmas, Mindy got you the airboat for the river when it thaws.
That's right. It's really good on the ice. I mean, it just
That's right.
wheelies. Yeah. I just tell the kids put their helmets on because
Exactly.
it gets dangerous.
That's good. That's good. So we're in 2022, as you guys point out. So it is interesting to think. Now, you guys weren't even born yet if we went back 50 years. But 1972 to 2022, there's probably some similarities. We could find some maybe fashion things or something, and inflation or whatever. It's the same. There's a lot of things that are different, certainly income and homes and all of that, the prices of all of that. Anything you find, Mindy, from 50 years ago that kind of is interesting?
One thing I think is interesting, probably twofold. I mean, I am a woman, so when you talk about fashion, you know, it talked in here a little bit about bell-bottom jeans and being trendy and kind of a fashion staple. We're seeing that come back now as well. But on the flip side, what's really interesting to me is the, medium home cost in 1972 is literally less than a new vehicle in 2022. Right. And that just seems, it's just kind of hard to fathom when we take a look at some of those numbers and would have changed over the years as we take a look at cost of items.
Nolan, anything for you?
Yeah, well,
history buff or anything?
A little bit of history buff, but yeah, it's one of those things that, space and exploration and those non-civilian related. Now look at us. We're literally sending people up into space. Now, not necessarily the same as like going to a space station, but I mean, we're getting there. So it's very interesting that where we were at back then and where we're at now is just, it's phenomenal, some of the technology we've seen. But yeah, it's neat to, so Mindy and I aren't that young. We're 42, so we're right behind you. So
right, but you weren't born yet at this point.
No.
In 1972. and President Nixon was the one who got the space shuttle program started in 1972. That's interesting. Now, for me, because when I graduated from high school, I signed with the Dodgers. I go off to play. I'm washed up at 20, and I go back to college. So I'm in college 80 to 84. And the drinking ages when I was coming into high school at that time, in 1972, most states maybe had a minimum legal age of 18, but there was no federal drinking age back then. So when I was in college, the rules or the laws were you could drink 3.2 beer at 18, but 6.0 beer and liquor were only for those 21 or older. Well, 1972 was still Vietnam War. It didn't finish till 1975, and I always thought it was crazy that somebody could go to war, but yet they could not drink. That seemed kind of crazy to me. So then in 1984, they changed all that. They just made everything 21 for drinking age, and you guys are health buff, so you guys don't do all that. But I always think it's kind of interesting, some of the old laws or rules or what have you. One of the other similar, and we're not to that level of the 70s, Mindy, would be inflation. The 70s was double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates. Get 15% on your CD, but pay 15% on your house loan. So now, though, I think in December it was a 7% year-to-year, December to December inflationary rate. So inflation is becoming a factor and became a factor last year. Do you have to plan for that with your clients at McIntosh and Associates?
One of the biggest things with inflation is, folks, we do need to, it's really nice to look historically and look back as we're progressing to the future. And inflation, we need to worry about interest rates rising. Inflation is on the rise. So even when we're talking to a lot of our, pre or post retirees that are eligible and drawing Social Security, we talk about the increase that they're receiving on Social Security, but on the flip side, we can talk about what's happening with their actual cost of Medicare Part B and cost of services and to travel and just what it's looking like in the next 5 to 10 years. And here we do we kind of do a financial analysis and really take a look at their income and expense reports. And it's very interesting for folks to take a look, especially with everything that folks have been through with the pandemic. A lot of folks are retiring earlier than what they had once maybe expected to do so. And when we look 5 and 10 years down the road at what we input for inflation, they really need to think about what have they done to save and what are they spending, because those costs are going up in the future, regardless of if you say you're going to spend as much as you are today or not. You're actually going to need more money than you think. So here at McIntosh and Associates, it's so important that we take a look. Whether you're retirement age, looking to retire, or already are retired, it's definitely something that we want to make sure that you're aware of and get some of those forms in your hands and have that conversation. So call us here at 877-222-8849 to really look at inflation and, your journey for 2022.
And that's the big problem that we're seeing, is that we see some people now, they're fearful of the market. And not that we shouldn't say that we're not, but obviously cautious would be a better word, because the issue is that let's say we're just going to hoard cash. Well, the problem is inflation is 7%. We're losing 7% on that money. So, kind of the talk again we have with clients is that even if we're in the most conservative bubble that we want to be in as far as risk goes, losing 7% of your money, you might as well just throw it into something at least that can gain something. So that's an interesting fact that we have with clients, and a talk that we have to have is let's think about it opposite. Just sitting in the bank is actually working against you right now in the current environment. Now, if, it's one of those things where interest rates go up and we can put it into something in a safer vehicle, then that's great, like a CD. But right now, there's nothing with interest rates being so low that we can do that with. So therefore, we may need to put it into something that keeps it liquid, but in the market, conservative as far as the risk goes, where at least we have some potential for gains.
All right, so Nolan, Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, last fall was saying, we're probably going to raise interest rates once in 2022, 23, 24, 25. We're going to do it once a year maybe. Well, they've changed that. Now they're saying we're going to raise interest rates maybe 3 or 4 times this year. How does that factor in, or does it?
It 100% does. I mean, usually when we look at historicals now, and obviously, the market has done crazy things, but we like to look at historicals. But anytime they start to raise interest rates, a lot of time we see a market pullback. And why is that? Well, the market's controlled by supply and demand, just like prices on cost of goods. So what happens is when those interest rates start to go up, bonds sometimes become more favorable. So people start going to those and leaving obviously what's in the market because they're fearful of what's going to happen next there. So that's something we need to watch, and necessarily something that we necessarily want to be retroactive on. But, in the past, obviously bonds have not been the place to possibly be just because interest rates have been so low. So it's one of those things we will watch and we'll have to see. We haven't really talked about number-wise, they've talked about maybe 3 or 4 times this year, like you said, but they haven't talked about, is it 0.25%, is it 0.5%? They've obviously said they're going to stop buying back certain entities through the federal government. So that's obviously part of the plan as well. So we'll have to continue to watch, and that's why it's ever evolving, and that's why we're always in communication with clients saying, hey, this is what our philosophy is, this is where we think the market's going. And so that's why we try and keep everybody up to date, so that way there's no surprises. We try and transition as much as we can into those different phases, even with interest rate changes.
So, Mindy, not too long ago, I watched 60 Minutes, and typically I would just watch the Golf Channel, or it's a Sunday night, I'll watch the football game. But they were going to talk about the Great Resignation, the over 2 million people that just quit their job last year. And one of the stats that they came up with, and this was the LinkedIn person that was talking, she had a master's and a PhD and all of that. And she said before the pandemic, 1 in 67 workers worked remotely. Since that, so after 2020, it's now 1 in 7 workers work remotely today, and compared to 1 in 67 in 2019. Are you surprised by that?
Not at all. When we take a look at the pandemic, and even folks taking a look at business owners looking at their overhead. So if they're not having as much day-to-day traffic need to be in their office, depending on office size, and if they're dealing with a type of service industry that deals with the public, they can then off-site or have a work from home from some of their admin. And we've seen, employer side cutting costs, maybe some of those admin feeling more comfortable controlling their own environment. So, I challenge you that if you're feeling like you would like to retire now, there's just some checklist items that we look at depending on your age and, health factors, benefits, what you need to do with your 401, and how do we help you to decide and set that financial plan.
So at McIntosh and Associates, they walk you through, Mindy, Nolan, and the team will walk you through the Dream-Focused Wealth Plan. It's a discovery meeting first. They've got to know what are your hopes and dreams and what do you want to do in retirement. Then they analyze your investments, basically. What kind of income do you need, and what are you going to spend when you're in retirement? It's not our grandparents' retirement anymore. Retirees today are going, not sitting at home in the rocking chair. Then they come up with a solution. Then it's implementation. Then they update it because things happen in our life. So it's not written in stone. It's all kind of a living, breathing document because it's all about you. What do you want to do? How are you going to do it? And let's come up with a plan, the Dream-Focused Wealth Plan at McIntosh and Associates. If you'd like to learn more, how does that impact you? You're the CEO. It's your retirement. Look at McIntosh and Associates, your CFO. You're the pilot. They're the co-pilot. You guys are walking hand in hand in this. They're on the same side of the table as you. It's 877-222-8849, 877-222-8849. We're just getting started with Mindy and Nolan on Wealth Michigan with the McIntoshes. We've got a lot to get to. Stay with us. We're back right after this.
Who will help you get there? Wherever you want to go and whatever you want to do in retirement, McIntosh and Associates can help you get there. You do the dreaming, they do the planning. It's your retirement, but you need a guide. As you approach retirement, McIntosh and Associates can make sure you're on the path to retire on your terms. And once you're retired, they'll help you stay on course. Think of it as a roadmap for your retirement. The team at McIntosh and Associates wants you to have the retirement you've worked so hard for. Come in and meet with them today. They'll help you create a retirement roadmap that's tailored to your dreams, your lifestyle, and long-term financial goals. Call today at 877-222-8849 and schedule a visit. Call 877-222-8849. That's 877-222-8849. Firm offers insurance services. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC.
Get started today to develop your own dream-focused wealth plan with the team at McIntosh and Associates. Schedule a complimentary first visit today. Call 877-222-8849.
Glad you're with us today for Wealth Michigan with the McIntoshes. Mindy and Nolan. Mindy started the company back in 2004. Nolan joined the team in 2018. Nolan had the impressive career. He's got a doctorate from Andrews University in physical therapy. He was a PT, athletic training world. So he's always making Mindy work out. Is that the deal, Nolan?
Yeah, and I make her post it so that way everybody knows, on
Exactly.
social media what Mindy is doing. No, if you watch her workout, she's awesome. I can't do what she does. It's really actually amazing what she can do as a workout. So,
Yeah, I think, Nolan, you should sit in the chair, watch her ride the stationary bike or Nordic track or whatever, and just have a beer, watch basketball, and have a good time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about 401ks and IRAs. And 401ks, you got 403bs, 457s, 401as. You go on and on and on. But we're going to kind of say they're 401ks and all those things like that kind of go together. And IRAs. So it's really interesting, Mindy, when you think about this. But in 2020, Americans' money was basically in traditional IRAs. And the total value of all those accounts is more than $19 trillion nationally. There is a lot of money sitting in tax-deferred items like IRAs and 401ks right now. So the IRAs and the 401ks, great idea for saving for retirement, but there are positives and there are negatives, I would think.
There sure is. So you definitely have already made the right choice if you're listening and you are contributing to your company, let's say 401k, and they're participating with a match. So our goal is to get you to at least deferring 10% of your income as soon as possible. We have some good books even to get in your hands about how to do that and pick yourself first and just get accountable to your saving and spending habits. But on the flip side, a lot of you might have a 401k Roth portion available and you're not taking advantage of that or you don't realize it. And I realize some of you don't have that available to you. But it's very, very important when we take a look at your future and what you're actually going to be spending in the form of taxes when you do start withdrawing in retirement. So anytime that you can put away some after-tax dollars now, let it grow tax-free, especially as we look at, in our opinion, increased tax rates in the future. Let's keep more of those dollars in your pocket. Let that compound interest accumulate for you. And today, now more than ever, we've seen that obviously for the past couple of years here with the pandemic at the office. We've seen so many folks that their biggest concern is, do I have enough money? Am I going to be okay to actually retire? So they might have been contributing to their retirement account, but not really knowing when and how am I going to retire and am I going to have enough funds? And most folks, even if you're listening, a lot of people don't have that written plan. They don't have an income analysis, or they don't have a plan of what's going to happen when I do retire and what are my next steps. So I know that a lot of you that are listening might be concerned about how would that actually work and how do we implement that to be able to be saving, and how do we move into a distribution phase from income. And we talked about it earlier on the first segment of talking about what's happening with inflation. And there are some vehicles that we can help you to fund your own retirement journey with hedging inflation and reducing some risk costs to give you that protection and security. So realistically, you really need to call our office at 877-222-8849. We can walk through the analysis. Or even if you're just someone that's still trying to get on the right track with contributing, we have a few books that we could get in your hand to start choosing yourself first and just walking alongside you together.
And the issue is that a lot of people, that we talk to, because I had a client call the other day and they're like, I need such and such monies out of my account so I can pay for this. And I said, is that net or is that gross? There's a big difference, because if it's in tax deferred, now we have to take out more. And if you're in the 12% bracket, and in Michigan it's 4.25% state, you now have 16.25% off the top you have to take to get whatever you want into the bank. And so it's one of those things that we have to look at, that literally and so that's why people sometimes say, well, I want to, I'm going to save in taxes this year. But if we're looking futuristically, the problem is that if we're looking at it from a standpoint of you have to take gross out, well, we may be jumping tax brackets, and all of a sudden we have to take out actually more out to be able to get your that income that you need. That's why it's so important that and again, this is why we have to come up with a plan that's right for you. And that's the problem, is that some people just kind of sometimes take these generalities that we speak about on the radio sometimes, but we have to come up with a specific plan. So maybe it is more important that we do into pre-tax. Maybe it's less important we put into pre-tax, important to raw. The other portion that we sometimes hear is, well, my employer will not contribute, if I do after-tax contributions. They have to. IRS says that what's going to happen is they will match it. The employer will match it. It'll just have to match it in pre-tax. So your portion goes in after tax. The employer's portion will go in pre-tax. So they still will match the same amount as what their company matches. It's going to go in pre-tax. So these are a lot of things that we weed through that a lot of people get confused on. And that's why we're here, is to be able to help walk people through that.
And again, the number is 877-222-8849. Mindy, one of the interesting things is I think everybody likes the idea of no tax, right? I want to be free of taxes when I get into retirement because everything I've got is in the tax-free world. It's in the Roth world. But not everybody should move into the Roth world, and there's ways to do it. If I had $500,000, I'm not going to take $500,000 probably and pay taxes on it this year and then move on tax-free. It'd be, I suppose, if I could afford it, maybe it'd be good. But, I mean, there's a rhyme to reason how to do that. I mean, we have to do this the right way, don't we?
Sure thing. And actually, someone was just recently in our office, and they have there's a couple different ways to look at this, and everyone's situation is different. But they have a few $1 million in pre-tax money. And they came in with the realization saying, hey, if we move some to Roth, that's not really going to help us at all. We're not going to do that. They're both roughly around the 65 years of age. And so we talked about their conception was kind of like what you're talking about. Hey, why would I convert all of this money and pay all of this tax today? So we talked about the when, why, and how of how much they would convert. The husband is no longer working and drawing Social Security currently. The wife is working, earning a nice salary and income. So we need to take a look at, now that he's Medicare eligible, we have to look at their overall income to see if he's going to pay what's called an IRMA, an income-related adjustment to his Medicare. So because we don't want Medicare costs to go up, and I realize they don't want to pay more in tax than they need to, but when we run a tax report and look at a strategy of taxes, we do more of a bucketing approach for this particular client, where every year we are going to convert some IRA money or some pre-tax to tax-free in the Roth. And year after year, we're going to do so until he reaches his required minimum distribution age at 72. Otherwise, if we just wait and defer the taxes because they don't need the extra income until he actually is 72, at that point in time, the amount of RMDs that he needs to be withdrawing along with the income from his wife, is really going to push up the cost of Medicare and their IRMA taxes all the way around. So we just had to look at a timeline. I realize folks get stuck in the here, today, and now, but we need to look not only today, but 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out, right? And on the flip side, if you're someone that's going to be drawing from that money in the next 2 to 3 years, then yeah, we don't want to move it into the Roth because there's some timelines of when you're going to be drawing from those funds. So everyone's situation is different. But if we take a look at whether it's an income analysis plan or we're looking at what is going to happen from a tax strategy and keeping funds in the family and giving you some protection there, let's make sure that we're walking through that together and creating that strategic plan for you within our holistic vision. So call our office or visit us on the web at wealthmichigan.com so that we can start that conversation now and have a visit together.
And, of course, the number is 877-222-8849. So, Nolan, let's touch on the required minimum distributions.
Sure.
The Secure Act of 2020 changed that age from 70 and a half to 72. So if we're 55, 60, 65, well, obviously we have time to move some of that money into the tax-free world and pay the taxes as we go, and we do it systematically. We're not going to do it all at once. You do it over time, and the more time you have, then the less that tax burden kind of happens, but you're alleviating some of that burden when you get to 72. Kind of explain the required minimum distribution. What is it? Why do we have to do it? Because if I don't need the money, I don't have to take it, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. But that's
Exactly
what
wrong.
we'd like to think that way, wouldn't we? No. So the required minimum distribution. So there's been a lot of talk about it, and you mentioned the Secure Act, and a lot of people think, oh, yeah, that's great. They delayed it till 72 type of thing. But really, when we're looking at a tax plan, not only for people that need the income, but we also have to look at it if they're not going to use it all beneficiary-wise. So that's why we sometimes do some tax planning, not just for the person, but that's why we have to know what your goals and dreams are. Some people are, hey, I want to spend it all. I don't care, if my beneficiaries get anything. Some are, well, I would love to leave some to my beneficiaries. Well, if that's the case, with the Secure Act, they changed the rules on how they can take those. And so we'd want to meet with you and say, these are the new rules on how that goes. But anyways, it's one of those things that a lot of people like to start doing these tax plans. I retired, now let's start looking, I've saved all this money, now what do I do? Well, for Mindy and I think it's so important that we meet with you prior to that, so that way we know where we're getting the income from, what does taxes look like in retirement, what may be our required minimum distribution that we have to take starting at the age of 72, and how do we reduce that to make sure that if we don't need the income, then, how do we reduce that so that we don't take as much? Because the problem is, once you hit 72 and you get that required minimum distribution age, like you said, even if you don't want it, you have to take it. That is the government's rule. So what we have to do with some of our clients that maybe they haven't planned as well and they became clients of ours, is that they have to take the required minimum distribution. And now, the old rule, right? Double taxation used to be illegal. Well, unfortunately, that's still not true today. If you don't need to require a minimum distribution, you take it and you say, hey, I want to invest that. Now what's that go into? It goes into another taxable entity called a non-qualified account if you don't need it. So that's the trouble we have, is that if you don't need it, we still have to put it into something that's going to get taxed again on the growth. So that's why it's so important we look at things and make sure that we're doing what's correct. And we don't want to wait till retirement. We want to plan that out prior to retirement so that way we know what the plan is. So that way you can be, and we call it work optional. You can flip the switch when you want to and say, okay, I am now work optional. I can work as much as I want, as little as I want. And that way we know where income's coming from, what taxes are going to look like. And it's very, very, very visual. I'm a visual learner, and so therefore I like to see things. If you're just winging it and saying, yep, I'm putting away till I retire, that's not a plan. So we want to make sure we sit down and visually see it. That way we know where our road path looks like, and that way you can feel way more comfortable, have a lot more confidence, and get a lot more control on what it looks like for your work optional life years.
So it's really about having a plan, and that's certainly what the McIntosh & Associates team can do for you, the Dream Focus Wealth Plan. If you'd like to learn more, it's 877-222-8849, 877-222-8849. Some interesting things in the IRA and 401k world we're going to talk about next. Stay with us. This is Wealth Michigan with the McIntosh.
Of all the questions you get asked every day, this is one you shouldn't ignore. How much money in your 401k or IRA is actually yours? Not what its current value is, but how much of it will end up in your pocket, not the government's. Remember, you still might owe taxes on that money. Make sure you aren't overpaying. Keep every dollar you're entitled to. Look, I know it's confusing, it's complicated, and it's definitely not fun. That's why at McIntosh & Associates, we work with tax professionals to help make sure you aren't paying more in taxes than your fair share. It's your money. You deserve to know what's at stake. Call our team at McIntosh and Associates today. Get started. 877-222-8849. 877-222-8849. Don't do the IRS any favors. 877-222-8849. Firm offers insurance services and may not give tax advice. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC.
Schedule your complimentary first visit with the Macintoshes right now. Call 877-222-8849. That's 877-222-8849.
Welcome back to Wealth Michigan with the Macintoshes, Mindy and Nolan. I'm Mark Elliott. Glad you're with us. You want to find out more about the team at McIntosh and Associates, always encourage you to go to the website. A lot of great information there, wealthmichigan.com. The Dream Focused Wealth Plan, that's the process that Mindy and Nolan run their clients through. So there's an income strategy, investment strategy, a tax-efficient strategy. There's health care, long-term care, legacy, estate planning, Social Security, Medicare. It's all in the Dream Focused Wealth Plan, and everybody's situation is different. There's not a plan for those in Freeland or a plan for those in Saginaw or in Bay City or in Midland. It's not just a blanket. Well, here's where you're from, so you get this retirement. No, it's about you and your hopes and dreams for retirement. If you'd like to learn more, it's 877-222-8849. No cost for this. Team's here to help. They just don't know if they can until they hear from you. 877-222-8849. We're talking about the IRAs and 401ks is what we're talking about right now, but the Secure Act of 2020. It changed the required minimum distribution age from 70.5 to 72, which makes sense because now it's at least an age. It could have been 70 or 71 or 72, which get rid of the halves, but that's how they do it. But it's now 72 where you have to start taking money out of those tax-deferred 401ks and IRAs because the IRS now wants their money on your harvest. They didn't want it on your seed, but they do not want it now on your harvest. So one of the big changes, Nolan, in that Secure Act as well was the stretch IRA. So my daughter's 21. So if I died this year, left her my $100 IRA, but let's say it was $100,000, for example. So if I died and left that to her, by the time, and her life expectancy would probably be 85 or 86, somewhere in there. Let's say it was 86. That gave her, 66 years to pull that money out. She could do it, kind of every year, pay the taxes on it, but she's pulling a little bit out. The Secure Act changed that to, it doesn't matter if, so if you have a 40-year-old daughter or son that you're going to leave your money to, or 50, now they're getting into more earnings at that point, and you leave them an IRA, for example, you're leaving them a big tax burden because now, let's say it was $1 million you left, they have only a 10-year window to take it out, right? They kind of did away with the old stretch IRA, right?
Yeah, they did 100%. So, that's the issue is that required minimum distributions are basically not a thing anymore for, beneficiaries that are non-spousal. Now, that's where it gets confusing sometimes because your spouse would still roll it into their own and some tax strategies we could still use there as well.
So if it was you, for example, if it was you two, and you passed away and you left your IRA to Mindy then just becomes the owner. There's not a stretch IRA rule anymore. But if you left it to your daughters, then that stretch IRA comes in, right?
But there's a strategy there too. I mean, we have certain, handful of clients that, let's say they're not the 59.5, right? And so what we'll do is we'll keep that into a beneficial IRA. So this is an interesting situation we can do for people. So I'm kind of getting off the topic, but sometimes we'll keep that into a beneficial IRA because if they put it in their own name and they're under the age of 59.5, they're going to get a 10% penalty. So we may want to put it into, keep it in a beneficial IRA, and then right at year 10, you can actually do this. IRS allows you to put it in your own name, and then you can obviously acquire it as your own. So there's some strategies there that we can use for spouses that we can't do with non-spouses. Now, non-spouses, you're right. The time starts. So when the person passes away, there's a 10-year timeline that non-spousal beneficiary now has to take that. And if they're in their 50s and they're higher income earning years, and we know taxes are going to change from here, that 22% tax bracket is going to change. Now they might be, half that IRA might be gone by year 10 to taxes. So that's the issue is that they have to draw it off by year 10, even if they don't need the income. And so that's kind of the kick in the pants a little bit is that a lot of people are like, oh, that's great. They increased the age to 72 and we got more time for our required minimum distributions. But government's pretty darn smart. They figured it out that they're going to get their hands on the money quicker one way or the other. And so when the person passes away, that's when the non-spouses are really going to get that taxable burden.
So, Mindy, if let's say, for example, that the husband is 70, the wife is 50. So you have a huge gap in age. And obviously the females live longer anyway. But because of like RMD age, for example, the husband was 70, he's going into the RMD age at 72. He can actually put some of that money in the wife's name because she's not of at that age yet, and it kind of you can lessen. There's ways around a lot of this stuff if you work with somebody that understands it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and we can uncover the main risks that, pose a threat to retirement, including, taxes, and not just taxes too. It can be, stock market volatility or inflation, or even the, increased cost of healthcare. So, when we're working with folks that have an age gap between the two of them, number one, generally speaking, that older spouse is really trying to protect their loved one that is, years young to them. And we can really take a look at, what happens when they lose that income from the spouse, or what happens when, they're drawing, let's say, current RMDs from an account. And now that spouse that was drawing RMDs passes away, what is now incurring from the widower that's now still living, and what's going to happen with their income? How do they take a look at Social Security depending on age? If they're too young to draw, and what that widower is going to receive and the timeline. So not only do we look at accumulation strategies, but we're also looking at withdrawal strategies and really generations, right? So we need to look at the future generations to come, whether it's you're looking to spend all your money, like folks that were in earlier this week, they want to spend it all, not looking to leave any to their loved ones, or whether they really want to leave a legacy to, their children, or a lot of times, grandchildren in this instance, or even just helping out with increased cost of, college funding in the future. But we need to continue to take a look at that, because we need to make sure that folks are generating income in retirement. And whether they're a married couple or when someone passes away, with inflation that we've talked about earlier and increased rise of taxes that we see coming in the future, it's super, super important for us to run that income analysis, take a look at not only the income, but the tax plan, and get that written down. And that way, when we prepare for the unexpected, when things happen, it doesn't uproot everything as much. So to prepare and be open to have conversations about this is really important, because a lot of folks need to just go back to the basics and have a budget. So that way they can plan the retirement they're dreaming of, and make sure they know, what are we spending every month, and what does the next chapter of their life look like as they're looking at savings and investing. So reach out to us here at 877-222-8849. And, let's make sure that you're not in danger of running out of money or spending more than you need to in taxes, or just by not knowing, implementing a strategy that just wasn't the best one.
So let's finish this up with the 401k. The required minimum distributions, the way I understand it, if you have IRAs, you can lump all those together and you pull out a percentage you need to. If you want to, you don't have to pull something out of every IRA, but you can't lump the 401ks in with the IRAs. They're on their own world over there, so you have to do some required minimum distributions over there. But in the 401k world, Nolan, I think this is always an interesting play that I don't think a lot of people know. I never heard of it before talking with you guys. And that is, at the age of 59 and a half, most employers, and sometimes it's 55 and sometimes it's never, but a lot of times employers will let you take control of your 401k, where you move that money out into your own IRA at the age of 59 and a half. And let's say you're going to retire at 65. So at 60, you go, ooh, that's a good idea. You're going to take the next 5 years still contributing to your 401k at work, but you've taken control of your money. Can you explain that in-service distribution of a 401k?
Yeah, and so that's you're right. And there's some bigger companies, like you kind of alluded to, that sometimes they can do it as early as 55, but most, I'd say about probably 96% of the companies out there will make you wait until you're 59 and a half, and you can do what's called an in-service distribution. The reason why we look at it from this perspective is that, sometimes people look at the market as, because there's so many things you can pick from, so many things, so many choices. And some people, in their life think choices are good. Some people say, hey, if you can limit my choices, that gives me better security. It makes me feel better. In the 401k world, all these plans, there's only specific funds you can pick from. And so for us at McIntosh & Associates, we think that's actually not as good as it could be as if we roll it out and put it into an IRA, because then we're able to basically pick anything we want at that point in time. The other reason that we think that it's important to roll it out of a 401k is because there's nobody watching it for you. You are on the hook. You are the investor. You are the one that is going to be watching this. You are the one that emotionally has to be. You don't have anybody coaching you, really, right? The 401k, just you're putting into it and you're hoping it makes it type of thing. If we can, at 59 and a half, roll it out of there and have somebody actively watching it, maybe come up with even an income plan, right? Because at 59 and a half, we're starting to look at, obviously, some things possibly we're going to need for income, because most people, in their 60s, they're starting to think, okay, now I start to look at retirement. So maybe we pull out their starting income plan early for you, so that way we can turn income rate and retire, so that way it creates a pension for you. So there's a lot of different things we can do strategy-wise, depending on the person, that we can do with an in-service distribution that a lot of people don't realize. And so it's one of those things that we want to look at, have you come in, see if it makes sense to do that. If it does, then we start doing it, and it's very easy. Most of the time, it's just a simple phone call. People are like, oh, I'm going to get taxed on it, or it's going to cost me a lot of money to be able to roll it out of there. It is a simple phone call. It is going to stay, if it's in a regular 401k, it's going to still stay tax deferred, and we're going to roll it out, and it's not going to cost anything tax-wise. So that's why we would want to sit down, look at it, and say, is this a better option for you? Sometimes we advise and say, no, the better option is for you to keep it in your 401k. Sometimes people come in, they're not 59 and a half yet, but yet, sometimes I'll give them advice on what I would think they should go into based on what their fund in the 401ks allow and what their risk is. So if you can give us a call at 877-222-8849, that way we can at least get the ball rolling. And we call it the Dream Focused Wealth Plan because we think it's important to dream. We think it's one of those things. And what I tell people, the only difference between a dream, and reality is a plan.
877-222-8849 again is the number. There's no cost to chat with them. 877-222-8849. Glad you're with us today for Wealth Michigan with the McIntoshes. Mindy Nolan back for our final segment right after this.
To learn more about the team at McIntosh & Associates, check out their website anytime at wealthmichigan.com. That's wealthmichigan.com.
Welcome back to Wealth Michigan with the McIntoshes, Mindy and Nolan. You can find out more about the team, wealthmichigan.com. Of course, a dream-focused wealth plan, and the team at McIntosh & Associates can certainly help you with that. 877-222-8849. Find out more on the website, wealthmichigan.com. All right, Mindy, brand new year, a lot going on. And I know I've been seeing Nolan post all your workout stuff. I see that you're riding 9,000 miles or doing 9,000 steps every day. But I also have seen the McIntosh Minute. What's all going on at McIntosh & Associates?
You bet. So I like doing the McIntosh Minute here. It continues to let basically our clients know what is happening just on a quick little weekly update. They're usually 1 to 2 minutes long. Sometimes they're talking about what's really pertinent of, inflation right now and taxation, talking about retirement. A lot of times we'll talk about implementing a Medicare to their strategy as they're aging in. And just recently we did one on, kind of new year, the new you, goals, that type of thing. And one thing I want to bring up that we've just recently done, and we're really talking about even here as a team, we're having a goal strategy session even on Monday, is number one, we all need to take a little bit of time and communicate. So a word of mine for the year is communication, meaning that what goes on in our mind, we need to then, in my opinion, verbalize it, put it on paper, and own it. And my mom and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, and there was this little motto of this little frame at one of our local shops here, and it said, if not now, then when? And for her, it might be wearing new clothes or wearing perfume she's had for 3 years. What are we saving this for? Let's make sure that we're living for today, but also being well aware of things. And so I don't want people to just try to create what's called a New Year's goal, right? It's a new year, new you. No, I think goals should be set anytime, even though this is the new year, but I think they need to be measurable. So when we talk about goal setting, I think it should be an idea of having some SMART goals. So for those of you that are listening and you like acronyms, you could say the SMART is, the S could be for specific. Make sure that goal is clear. So for those of you that are listening to our show here today, maybe that is about saving money, for future taxes, or when are you going to retire, or living your retirement dream, whatever that might be, make sure it's very well defined. It also needs to be measurable. If you're worried about running out of money or spending more time with family, or, what's going to happen over the next several months at work or in life, make sure that whatever that goal is, you can measure your progress. And then the A is make it achievable. So, you talked about exercise, and physical fitness is really important to Nolan and I to be healthy. But if you are someone who has never really exercised, okay, our one daughter's a good example of this. She's just not really into that. So her goal of exercising every day is probably not going to be exactly where that should be set. So if we can talk about that together and we say, hey, she wants to start out at 10 minutes a day of doing some sort of additional activity 3 days a week. Well, let's measure that and let's make sure that it's achievable and relevant. Does it align with your priorities? Make sure you're not out there chasing the Jones. So if your next door neighbor just retired and you don't think you're quite ready for that yet, make sure you probably don't just retire, or let's make sure we sit down and have a conversation first of what might that look like for you and how do we enter those next stages? And then timely. So what is your timeline to have a reasonable start date? And is there an end date for this, or is this something that's going to be a new lifestyle for you? So I challenge you to make sure that you're focusing on things that are important to you. Here for me, it's time and, commitment. So maybe for you, it's time, it's family, wherever your goals are, think of the SMART and tune into our Macintosh Minutes. If you want to tune into our Macintosh Minutes, you can go ahead and find those either shared on our Macintosh and Associates Facebook page. You will also see them posted on wealthmichigan.com. Or if you'd like to subscribe to our email list and receive our market updates, our Macintosh Minutes, and some newsletters, please reach out to our office at 877-222-8849. And via request form, we'll be sure to get this information and share it with you on a weekly basis.
Macintosh and Associates Incorporated is an independent financial services firm that utilizes a variety of investment and insurance products. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM. AEWM and Macintosh and Associates Incorporated are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Macintosh and Associates Incorporated is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Macintosh and Associates Incorporated.